Manly Hall Official is glad to produce, publish and offer. Devoted to spiritual and philosophical problems. May 1st, 1934. Dear friend, nearly 14 years have passed since I began writing and lecturing on philosophy and metaphysics. During these years I have delivered several thousand lectures and published some 40 books and essays. Students of occultism, comparative religion and kindred subjects throughout the world have honored me with their support and confidence. The years have brought an ever-increasing demand for the organization and classification of my ideas and teachings so that the average person can make fuller use thereof as the foundation for a personal code of more intelligent living. During the prosperous periods preceding the present social crisis, people were so obsessed by economics that few concerned themselves with the deeper issues of life. As adversity becomes general, however, sober thinking comes into fashion. When our systems fail us, we must finally come to depend upon ourselves for security and well-being. It has been demonstrated throughout history that learning is restored in trying times and ignored during prosperous interludes. If the philosophical doctrines which I have been promulgating were my own or had been derived from the prejudices and conceits of untrained and incompetent minds, I would have small courage for their perpetuation. It has been wisely observed that opinion is a falling sickness of the mind. It is far from my intention to burden an opinion-ridden world with more ill-digested speculation. The fallacies of perverse thought are everywhere apparent, and the absence of a mature mental approach to the great problems of the day is observable in every department of society. When, however, I know that the substance of my teachings has been drawn from the most mature reflections of the world's ablest and most profound thinkers and is justified by thousands of years of test and application, I am inspired, even compelled by an inner impulse, to devote my time and energy to the dissemination of these teachings. It is this inner conviction of the paramount importance of spiritual and philosophical education in these uncertain times which has sustained me through the numerous vicissitudes of past years. The knowledge which I have derived from my almost continuous researches into the divine science of living is so priceless an asset in these troubled days that I feel it a duty as well as a privilege to pass on the results of my researches as a working formula for a useful and intelligent life. Eternal Reason, Creator of all things, the man thou hast fashioned in thy wisdom awaits the work thou wouldst have him do. The Prayer of Hermes. The average man or woman has neither the time nor the training necessary to gather from the experience of the ages the substance from which to evolve an enlightened personal philosophy, yet such a personal philosophy is absolutely essential to the mental and spiritual well-being of the individual. A man is what he thinks. His mental attitude is the key to his code of action, and civilization is fundamentally a code of action. According to Cicero, the purpose of civilization is to bring the human family to an enlightened and cooperative state. This highly desirable condition is only possible when men themselves are enlightened. In every age sages and prophets, philosophers and priests, have sought by example and word to educate and inspire mankind in the essentials of enlightened living. If you're enjoying this video and finding value in the content, we kindly ask you to take a moment to subscribe to the channel. A large portion of our listeners and viewers haven't subscribed yet, and by doing so, you'll help us grow and continue bringing you more high-quality audiobooks. Your support means a lot to us, and it's just one click away. So, go ahead and hit that subscribe button to stay connected and never miss out on our latest releases. The lives of these heroic souls are perpetuated in the scriptures and classics of every nation, and their words are preserved as a vast literature in the great libraries of the world. The British Museum alone has ready 50 miles of bookshelves. Locked within its ancient volumes are the accumulated ideals and inspirations of the race. Having inherited so much of wisdom, is it not amazing that we remain so unwise that possessing as we do so much of that which is good and valuable, we remain unrefined and ignoble? Is it strange then that a great man like De Quincey should sit weeping in the British Museum, saddened by the realization that he could not live long enough to read all of these books and share with all the dreamers of the past their vision for human improvement? Yet De Quincey has left us a formula, derived from his despair. As I cannot read all books, he said, I will read only the best. The first step in the organization of thought, therefore, is to reduce the complexity of knowledge to a more or less simple program and to discover from the whole philosophical literature of the race those parts which are of primary significance. He who uses this process will soon discover that beneath a vast and complex philosophical literature are a few basic principles. These principles, once grasped, equip the mind to cope with any issue with at least a fair measure of true intelligence. The last 15 years of my life have been devoted to an examination and classification of essential learning. During this time my research has covered over 40 great systems of religion and philosophy. My purpose has been to focus the light of an ageless wisdom upon the problems of today, to discover, if possible, from those who have lived well the secret of right living, from those who have thought well the secret of right thinking, and from those who have acted nobly the secret of noble action. I believe that to some measure at least I have succeeded in this effort, and that I have recovered from the obscurity of centuries the essential elements of that enlightened mode of existence that Pythagoras called the philosophic life. If, as Plato has so nobly written, philosophy is the greatest good the gods have ever referred upon men, it naturally follows that the possession of it bestows the greatest wealth that any person is capable of accumulating. The philosopher only is truly great, the philosopher only is capable of being truly good, and philosophy alone contributes that immortality which must finally be the quest of every man. You may naturally ask what I mean by philosophy, for it is evident that my use of the word is, according to the popular concept. The word philosophy was first used by Pythagoras, the greatest of the Grecian initiates, who is accredited with having created the term. The word itself means, friendship for or love of wisdom. A philosopher then is one who loves wisdom, whose life is devoted to the discovery and application of truth. That which we love we serve, and a philosopher is one who loves wisdom so sincerely that he becomes its servant, obeys its laws, and dedicated himself to its principles. A philosopher is not only who reads, studies, or memorizes the thoughts or opinions of others, but one who so cherishes the great ideals of the race that he lives a harmless and creative life, achieving the highest axiom of the Platonists. Namely, wisdom is thinking with God and thinking with nature. You will perceive how different this is from the modern concept, for wisdom today is interpreted to be thinking of God and of nature. According to the modern definition, philosophy covers 6 fields of mental activity, as follows. 1. Metaphysics, which includes theology, cosmology, and the nature of being. 2. Logic, or the doctrine of reasonableness. 3. Ethics, which includes morality and character and the discovery of the nature of good. 4. Psychology, which includes the whole field of mental phenomena. 5. Epistemology, which is concerned primarily with the problem as to whether knowledge in itself can exist in an absolute form. 6. Aesthetics, which includes the science of the reactions caused by beauty, harmony, elegance, and nobility. This classification is excellent as far as it goes, but is incomplete. Every branch of learning is susceptible of division into a septenary, its parts being tender the rulership of the 7 sacred planets. The 7th branch of philosophy, not given in any exoteric classification, is theurgy, a word first used by the Alexandrian Neoplatonists. The word theurgy means a divine work and was defined by the ancients as doing the work of God. The popular translation associates the word with miracles, but it really means the science of becoming godlike and covers the actual processes by which a man becomes a philosopher, or, as the ancients called it, the disciplines of philosophy. Thus in its 7 branches philosophy covers all of the sacred and profane forms of learning, and by the possession of it the individual achieves the perfection of himself. Only by becoming a philosopher in the truest sense of that term does man fulfill the purpose of his existence. Therefore it is our intention to devote the first 12 of these student letters to a summary of the principles of philosophy. I believe that through these letters I shall be able to accomplish a work that has been close to my heart for many years. I want to bring to everyone who is interested in self-improvement a concise and organized picture of what constitutes a philosophic life. We shall pass, step by step, through all of the departments of philosophy, from metaphysics to theurgy, interpreting each of them, not in the superficial way in which they are approached by modern scholastics, but according to the method advocated and practiced by those great initiated philosophers to whom we owe all that we possess of an inspired learning. I want you to come to look upon philosophy not as an abstract and difficult word, suggesting arduous labor, but as a simple and friendly term standing for all that is good and all that is real in knowledge. I want you to make philosophy the great work of your life. I want you to think of it as the greatest building power in society. The mastery of philosophy is the supreme accomplishment of which man is capable, and the living of philosophy is the most noble of all arts. Accompanying this letter is a little folder containing definitions of philosophy, or possibly more correctly, definitions about philosophy. These will show the high esteem in which this royal art has been held by able thinkers of both the ancient and modern worlds. To these I want to add my own definition. Philosophy is the perfect science and the science of perfection. It is that branch of learning devoted to the understanding and application of knowledge. It has as its first work the elevation of the human intellect to a realization of the divine plan. It has as its final consummation the elevation of man to absolute union with universal wisdom. In the process of perfecting its disciples, philosophy makes use of every known form of knowledge, and he who perfects himself in its principles becomes truly divine. As religion, philosophy leads to the knowledge of God. All philosophy it leads to the knowledge of self, and as science it leads to the knowledge and mastery of nature. In the words of Paracelsus, the beginning of wisdom is the beginning of supernatural power. In this present age, theology led to confusion and science to a hopeless unbelief. Only philosophy can bring us to the golden time we look for. A civilization built upon ignorance and perpetuated by ignorance is collapsing under the weight of ignorance. Only from philosophy can we derive that enlightened courage with which to face the day. Those who have light within themselves will pass triumphantly through the difficult years which lie ahead. Philosophy overcomes doubt, it rescues men from despair, it perceives justice beneath injustice, and gives vision and a certain vision. By philosophy we can live wisely and die well. The philosopher is unconquerable. The imperishable intellect survives every destruction. The philosopher is in the vanguard of progress. Those who perfect themselves in wisdom are called the twice-born, for by wisdom man is given a new birth. He departs from an old life with its uncertainties and limitations into a new illumined existence. Pythagoras refers to the philosopher as the deathless soul. The world we live in today is ruled by fear of life and fear of death. Wisdom alone can overcome fear. Love rules the sphere of the wise, and those who have learned to love life in its deepest and most mystical sense have escaped from bondage to fear and dwell in peace with all things. This letter is by necessity introductory. Next month we shall begin the outline of first principles with a discussion of tile departments of metaphysics, and a summary of metaphysical teachings concluding the supreme source and development of the universe and man. I have been frequently requested to give in written form my own philosophy of life, and as far as possible I shall do this through these letters, setting forth my own belief and undue standing at the world of spiritual and metaphysical thought. May I take this opportunity of thanking you for the interest and support which you have shown in my work, and hope that these letters will form a new bond of friendship between us. If you have friends who are interested in these subjects, or who might be led to such an interest through these letters, may we suggest that you enroll these friends to receive the letters, thus helping to spread a doctrine of enlightenment which we feel sure will enrich their lives. Yours sincerely, 944 West 40th Street, Los Angeles, California. Appendix to the lecture. Definitions in philosophy. To appreciate the scope and value of philosophy and its superiority over every other branch of learning, it seems appropriate to consider briefly the opinions of learned men relative to the importance and dignity of this noblest of human institutions. The quotations which follow are for the most part verbatim, but in a few cases we have slightly condensed the original statements, in no way, however, adding to or altering the meaning. Hume, be a philosopher, but amidst all your philosophy be still a man. Learning should never separate a man from his world nor cause him to feel himself superior to others, rather it should bring him closer to the heart of mankind and bestow upon his soul a realization of the dignity of all life and the identity of all creatures. Cicero, philosophy, right defined, is nothing but the love of wisdom. The soul, ultimately disappointed in human relationships, must turn from its attachment to outward forms and bestow its affection upon those imperishable truths which alone can satisfy man's yearnings. Southey, philosophy is of two kinds, that which relates to conduct, and that which relates to knowledge. The first teaches us to value all things at their true worth, to be contented with little, modest in prosperity, patient in trouble, equal-minded at all times. It teaches us our duty to our neighbor and ourselves, but it is he who pursues both that is the true philosopher. The more he knows, the more he is desirous of knowing, and yet the further he advances in knowledge, the better he understands how little he can attain, and the more deeply he feels that God alone can satisfy the infinite desires of the immortal soul. To understand this is the height and perfection of philosophy. From this definition it becomes apparent that sacred and secular knowledge are but the aspects of one divine institution. True philosophy is not satisfied to reason only upon moral concerns, but rises to loftier speculation intent upon discovering not only the law but the maker of the law. Gifford, Divine Philosophy. By whose pure light we first distinguish, then pursue the right, thy power the breast from every error frees, and weeds out all its vice by degrees. It is most fitting that a definition of philosophy should come to us in verse, for as science is the prose of living, so philosophy is the poetry of existence. By the perception of divine realities we come finally to rhyme all the dissonant lines of life. Epictetus, all philosophy lies in two words, sustain and abstain. The wise man sustains his reason by feeding it upon a sufficient diet of thoughts. He abstains from that which will bring sickness to his mind by eliminating from his thinking and living all thoughts and actions which are unreasonable and destructive. Coleridge, in wonder all philosophy began, in wonder it ends, and admiration fills up the interspace, but the first is the wonder of ignorance, the last is the parent of adoration. Only the philosopher possesses the power of intelligent appreciation. To the wise man the wisdom of the universe becomes apparent. From the intelligent contemplation of existence arises a full realization of the perfection of that parent cause upon which all creation hangs. Cicero, to study philosophy is nothing but to prepare oneself to die. We may face the small issues of the day with ignorance and still preserve some small illusion of security, but in the presence of that great transition which is the inevitable fate of all men, our only security lies in some adequate appreciation of the universe and its plan. Quarles, make philosophy thy journey. How wise was Th2T old emblem writer when he perceived that life is a journey in wisdom, action and experience and knowledge, and truth the whole purpose of our being. Epictetus, the first business of philosophy is to part from self-conceit. A man who overestimates himself will underestimate his world. To be humble is to admit the greatness of the universe. Out of a becoming humility arises the capacity for understanding. Muller, Max, philosophy is the knowledge of the limits of our knowledge. Beyond the small circle of the known stretches an eternity of uncertainties. Of this the wise man is aware, but he has found security in the realization that beyond the eternities of the unknown again is the all-sufficient circumference of truth. Aristotle, philosophy is the science which considers truth. Though Pilate's question remains unanswered, it is the opinion of the wise that it is not unanswerable. The philosopher knows that there is but one way to discover truth, and that is to become truth. Philosophy is the science of becoming. Bulwer Lytton, real philosophy seeks rather to solve than to deny. When the temple of wisdom is completed, much of its foundation will be made up of stones which sophists have rejected. There is no virtue in denying things as they are, but there is great virtue in discovering the reason for things as they are. Seneca, it is the bounty of nature that we live, but of philosophy that we live well, which is, in truth, a greater benefit than life itself. To live without thinking is to descend to the state of the brute, but to crown life with intelligent action is to rise to the estate of the supermen. Lavater, true philosophy is that which makes us to ourselves and to all about us better. There is no merit in wisdom, there is no reward in knowledge, there is no comfort in faith, unless these things manifest outwardly, subduing the violence of action and bringing us to a harmless mode of existence. Nisbet, the modern skeptical philosophy consists in believing everything but the truth, and exactly in proportion to the want of evidence, in making windows that shut out the light and passages that lead to nothing. Philosophy is nothing if not noble. It is of no value unless it inclines the race to gentle virtue and noble action. To the measure that it fails to adore the one, serve the beautiful, and venerate the good, it fails to be philosophy. Voltaire, the discovery of what is true, and the practice of that which is good, are the two most important objects of philosophy. Thinking is not merely an exercising of the mind, it is a directing of the mind. Only such as have organized thought to the accomplishment of some actual good are worthy to be denominated wise. Shaftesbury, the sum of philosophy is to learn what is just in society, and beautiful and nature, and the order of the world. Philosophy is founded upon vision and experience, vision to perceive a noble end and experience to modulate men's natural impulse to overhasten the reformation of his world. Plutarch, philosophy is the art of living. The arts are sciences of the beautiful, and if philosophy be the art of living, it must be the art of living beautifully. Shaftesbury, it is not a head merely, but a heart and resolution, which complete the real philosopher. Reason arises not from intellect alone, but from the whole life. It is built upon wise thinking, generous feeling, and trained perceptions. Thoreau, to be a philosopher is not merely to have subtle thoughts, but to so love wisdom as to live according to its dictates. Philosophy is first living, then thinking. The philosophic life is the only foundation upon which an intelligent life can be built. Seneca, philosophy is the art and law of life. By this Seneca infers that philosophy is a rule of procedure, a code by the living of which man becomes worthy of happiness. Selden, John, philosophy is nothing but discretion. By discretion we should understand that regulation of action by which all intemperance are controlled, whether they be of the mind or of the body. He who is discreet is above an unreasonable act and may be just termed wise. Cowley, to be a husbandman, is but a retreat from the city, to be a philosopher, from the world, or rather a retreat from the world as it is man's, into the world as it is God's. The world of God and the world of man are not separated by any distance other than the interval of understanding. As we grow wise, we depart not into some distant country, but rather we perceive the wise man's world emerging from the very ignorant world of our own sphere. Burke, philosophy is queen of the arts and the daughter of heaven. The wisest of the sages have always maintained that wisdom had its beginning not among men but among the gods from whom it descended for the salvation of humanity. Seneca, philosophy is the health of the mind. It is normal for man that he should think well, but the blight of materialism has destroyed his birthright to wisdom. It is therefore necessary in this benighted age for each man to struggle valiantly if he is to achieve to a normal and reasonable state. Londos, a true philosopher is beyond the reach of fortune. To be truly wise, it is necessary to so love wisdom that there is no place left in the mind for anxieties concerning the temporal state. He who lives in desire for plenty or in fear of loss has no right to call himself a philosopher. Sims, philosophy is reason with the eyes of the soul. The intellect in itself can perceive nothing beyond that which is intellectual, but the intellect, when quickened with spiritual perception, bestows the philosophic viewpoint. Here, the business of philosophy is to circumnavigate human nature. A philosopher must be fortified against himself. Philosophy is a conspiracy against the inadequacy of ourselves. By it we are given courage to act more nobly than is natural to the human animal. Lamartine, philosophy is the rational expression of genius. We may define genius as special aptitude, but when special aptitude is directed to the most important of all efforts, the perfection of self, it is termed philosophy. A philosopher is a genius who has discovered the most perfect use of his abilities. Joubert, whence? Whither? Why? How? These questions cover all philosophy. Whence God? Whither to God? Why law? How wisdom? From the infinite to the infinite we must proceed. The why of life is known only to the Maker. But from philosophy we learn how to fit ourselves into the plan of life and to prepare ourselves for final identity with our cause. Carlyle, the philosopher is he to whom the highest has descended and the lowest has mounted up, who is the equal and kindly brother to all. Between heaven and earth stands the wise man. His earthy part has been raised to its highest perfection as the instrument of a divine purpose. The higher part, the soul itself, has become tolerant of the limitations of the body, and wise in its own weakness is tolerant of the limitations of all other things. Copyright 2025 by Manly Hall Official. Thank you for listening. Please consider to subscribe, like, and share to help the channel growth. New videos on a daily basis.